Hi, everyone, and welcome to Practice Growth HQ. Now, today we're going to talk about maximizing the value of your practice. So we're on a podcast here to talk about growing it, but how do we actually maximize the value of our practice? And the perfect person to talk about this is my guest, Kerry Boulton. Kerry is an experienced entrepreneur with over 30 years of buying, starting, and selling businesses. She was the first woman. I love it. I love hearing first. She's a trailblazer. The first woman to own and manage an international freight company, which she sold after a successful multi-million-dollar turnaround. She holds a master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation and has taught MBA students all the way from what is effectively Grand Prix land, Albert Park in Melbourne. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much, Angus. Delighted to be here.
All right, Kerry, we like to start with the fast five, quicker questions, quicker answers to get to know you quickly. Question one, where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Sydney, believe it or not, in the western suburbs of Sydney, and found myself, grandparents actually raised me, my sister and we lost our parents. They were very young and we were very young. Anyway, at the ripe age of 25, I moved to Melbourne.
There
Yes.
you go.
Yeah.
All right. Question two, favorite book besides your own?
Favorite book besides my own has probably got to be the one that's right in front of me right now. In fact, this is a new edition, The New Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley.
Ooh.
You can see that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a new edition. I've just about read everything that Dennis wrote and published many years ago with cassettes, back in the days of cassettes and all the rest of it. Yeah. And it's amazing. His thought processes are amazing. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I've never had anybody mention that book to me, and I'm a pretty prolific reader. So that one, I'll be ordering that after the show. Kerry, question three, what's one of your superpowers?
One of my superpowers is probably thinking ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's helpful if we want to maximize the value of our practice. Question four, something you wish your 20-year-old self knew.
Oh, so much. I wish my 20-year-old self knew just how, frankly, the challenges that you need to overcome in terms of everything that life throws up at you, I suppose. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And finally, Kerry, question five, something you're grateful for.
Oh, I'm grateful for absolutely everything. I think I've been so fortunate to lead such a blessed life. And I do say every day, I'm grateful that I'm here on this side.
Yeah.
Not on the underside. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Or the overside, whichever one that might be. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I'll admit to you, I try to force myself every day to say 10 things I'm grateful for before I get out of bed, including one thing from me. It's something I learned from a member of my team. I used to talk about all these external things, and then she said, well, you've got to be grateful for some stuff about yourself as well, because we can be our own worst critics. However, the topic for today is about maximizing value for your practice. Yes, we're here to grow, but we want to maximize the value. How do we even determine what the value of our practice is, Kerry?
There's a lot of different factors go into value, and the underlying part of value really is being able to transfer your business to a potential new owner, or even whoever that might be, whether it's someone even in your family. So that the degree to which you can guarantee future profits creates transferability. And that encompasses a whole range of different activities and processes inside your business. And I'll just quickly run through some value drivers, if you like, that people could use as a basis to focus on. First of all, obviously your financials. Now, clearly, it involves money, your financials. You've got to have a really good set of books. And if you make sure that they're above board and accurate and not difficult to understand and read the way that you've put them together, and have them for at least 3 years if you're ever thinking of actually selling your business. The second thing would be to have a really good, strong database, a customer database. How systemized is it? Can you put your finger on it? How satisfied are your customers? Have you got some surveys and records that can stand behind what your customers think about you in terms of as a practitioner or for your own business? Are you reliant on anybody in particular? We think about reliance on particular team members, and maybe there's a supplier that you may be totally reliant on. You need to spread the load a little bit if you can.
Mm.
The other thing is differentiation marketing, I think, and the services that you're providing this along those lines, in that how consistent is it? How systemized is it? How reliant is it? And how reliant are you on that process to make it happen, so that you've got really good data that you can put your finger on? Which leads you to the whole marketing aspect of your business. What is it that actually differentiates you? What makes a difference? What keeps your customers coming back? And creating that whole recurring revenue cycle for you. Because basically, particularly if you're in health and allied health industries, especially, long-term clients mean a great deal.
Yeah,
So
they
they
do.
keep coming back to you and keep your revenue ticking over, so you can rely on the future revenue being there. That's certainly some of the key areas anyway, in terms of creating value.
That's a great list. Look, let's answer this question. Like, why do we even care about value? As a person, and Kerry and I have both been business owners for years, there is a sense where it's quite satisfying every now and then to sit back and say, what is this thing that I'm building?
Yeah.
And one of the great things about business, whether you're in healthcare or something else, is that you are, as it were, building it from nothing. If you set your business up from scratch, it didn't exist. And
Mhm.
then fast forward 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, suddenly you've got this thing that's worth something. And so I think, if I'm honest, many healthcare professionals are pretty high on the perfectionist. That's one of their traits. That's one of the reasons they do a great job. But we can be very tough on ourselves, which is, oh, it's okay, it's not perfect. But just every now and then, it's a good idea to sit back and go, okay, what's this thing that I'm building? What's the value of this thing? Now, there are some other advantages of that apart from the psychological ones, potentially for borrowing, if that's the path that you want to go down. And at some point, I guess all of us, whatever the business is, there's only a certain number of outcomes. We either shut it down, we
Mhm.
give it away, or we sell it. And
Mhm.
so the higher the value is, the better.
Mhm.
How do we find out what the value of our business is?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can give you a link to a little questionnaire that people can go to. And if they pop in their high level numbers, it'll actually give you a bit of evaluation based on a benchmark across the industry that you might happen to be in. But at the same time, it's keeping your ear to the ground to some extent. There are specialists who focus on the different industries like healthcare, and they'll know there's a general sort of multiple out there that's being offered, and it might be worthwhile just explaining a little bit what that means. And most businesses, if you're going to sell a business or place a value on it, it applies a multiple to your net profit. And again, the net profit, sometimes called SDE, seller's discretionary earnings, sometimes called EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. It just depends on the type or the size of the business, but they're all the same thing. It's the bottom line dollars, basically. And that multiple is a recognition of the risk of being able to retain your future profits.
Mm.
In general, it can be anywhere from maybe 3 to 6, 7 times profit that somebody will apply as the multiple, which is the goodwill, basically, that somebody might be prepared to pay for all your hard work that you've put in to grow that business and create it over X number of years, whatever it may have been.
Because they're effectively purchasing, as it were, future profits from you.
Correct. That's
Uh,
exactly right.
they don't have to go and start from scratch. Like we've
Correct.
already spoken about repeat patients, and dare I say, patients that you've got a long-term relationship with. It's not just good financial sense. It's as long as they're not too painful. It's actually one of the enjoyable things about the business. I've had owners say to me, Angus, I've been doing this for 20 or 30 years or whatever. Not only have I remember that person when they were a child, well, they've now grown up and they've got kids of their own. And it's that sort of multi-generational thing, which
Correct.
I've just got to believe has to make things more enjoyable as well as increasing the value of your business.
Yeah.
Now, in fact, a mutual contact of Kerry and my, Joanna Oakey, was on the podcast a few weeks back, and she said that you can have a healthcare practice sell for less than one times. And believe me, that is without even knowing anything about it, that's a sickly business.
Mm.
And on the other end of the scale, you can be up as high as 10x because for a publicly listed company, many of them are trading at that 10 times multiple. So 10 times whatever that profit is. Look, for the listeners of Practice Growth HQ, not too many corporations amongst us. It tends to be small business owners. That sort of 3 to 6 range is pretty
Yeah.
reasonable. And
Mm.
we want to be able to get that number up because one day, hopefully, we sell rather than shutting the business down. But I think the thing that really stuck with me from what you've said, Kerry, is you spoke about getting your financials, getting your customer database, not being too reliable on a supplier or a team member or whatever. It's that sense that someone else comes in and the business more or less continues to run the same way as that it's been running.
Correct. And it's all about risk at the end of the day.
Okay.
So the more you can do to lower the risk of the next person that comes along to take over your business, to buy your business, then the more valuable it becomes. So it's about risk more than anything. So what they're looking for some sort of guarantee. They don't want to take over your business and then all of a sudden have all of the clients disappear and go somewhere else because you haven't paved the way well enough for them really to be able to do that. And then again, that's a person who might be looking to buy your business. Put a hat on as if you are a buyer. And
Yeah.
if you were going to buy that business, this is the best way for people to understand it. If you're going to buy that business, your business, what are you going to look for? What would you want a guarantee if you're going to hand over a substantial sum of money for this practice? What would you want to see in terms of your future guarantee of being able to maintain that level of income?
Yeah, I think the short answer would be I'd like lots of repeat patients that have got great loyalty.
Correct.
And then what you aim for is a nice, smooth transition where Dr. Angus goes from 4 days a week and then he peters out a bit. I will say this, I know we're not here to talk about exiting per se, but that transition period is quite an important part of the whole process.
Sure is. Absolutely sure is. And even I can speak from personal experience with a family dentist, actually, and who retired and passed did sell the practice. And there was absolutely no transition whatsoever to the new owner, which was quite staggering, really.
Mm.
We had a good relationship with the practice anyway,
Yeah.
which I think is important. We certainly stayed there and continued to go. So it's very important, that whole transition process. You do want your clients to feel nurtured and valued because they make up your business. That's who they are. That's who makes up your business, despite all the other and everything else that goes on behind the scenes, of course.
Let's face it, healthcare is a fairly intimate business.
It is.
You're exposing yourself in a manner to your dentist, doctor, physio. I don't want to leave the listeners with this mental image, but I've had to sit there in my jocks in front of the dermatologist while he stares all over my body looking for cancer. Like, what an uplifting thing to do. And for the dermatologist, he would be like, that's just business as usual. And yet for us as patients, that's quite an intimate experience. For dentists, we lie in a position that in nature is the most vulnerable position you can, which is you lie on your back facing up. If you ever look at two animals fighting and then one animal gives in, that's the position they end up in.
Yes.
And that's what you're doing when you're at the dentist, physio, etc. Let's go back to these value maximizers then. 3 years of financials, what would this, and just be aware, even if you're not even thinking about selling your practice for 10 or 20 or 30 years, it's still good to keep an eye on the value. What would the future buyer be wanting to see with your financials over a 3-year period?
They want to see you might have your own management accounts, what you're doing in terms of your practice on an annual basis, but they'll also want to see your tax returns just to verify that what they're looking at is kosher.
Okay.
They're seeing the right information. There's a process called normalizing, and I don't know whether anyone's ever come across that previously, but usually what an accountant will do, what your accountants will do for you is normalize the bottom line. There can be personal expenses that go through the books of the practice. There might be one-off expenses for capital purchases that are there that are treated as expenses as opposed to being capitalized. And there might be special events. For instance, during COVID, most health practitioners would have suffered a bit in terms financially. Quite during those COVID years, they're quarantined a little bit because
Okay.
they're not representative of normal business as usual. Yeah, so anything that might be a one-off expense or an abnormal expense that occurs is written back or either added on or deducted, depending on which way it is. So you balance the books, basically. And I was trying to explain it to someone the other day to get a better understanding. If you've ever bought property, you know that when you do a settlement, there's a vendor allows, purchaser allows, that sort of balancing off. So that's basically what happens. You normalize the figures. So you're getting to what essentially could be a better bottom line, quite frankly. That's often the way it ends up. You end up having a better bottom line because you're adding back expenses that are not ongoing expenses necessarily to the business. The same thing applies if there's revenue as well for some reason, if you've got some great big lump of revenue that comes in for whatever reason. But, 9 times out of 10, it all relates to expenses, yeah.
Okay. And what about trends?
Trends in
3 years of data.
absolutely. If you've got, like I mentioned, if like with COVID, that just gets quarantined away. What we want to see the business trending upwards, preferably. If there's a spike, we want to know why. We want to know why there's a spike. If for some reason the business is trending downward, then let's have the explanation. Don't hide it. Let's understand what it is. Why is it trending down? It could be that something external has occurred that has caused it. And look, that leads me to another consideration that people need to have, no matter what business you're in, and that is around what we've coined the 5 Ds, things that actually happen. So it's making sure that your business can survive if any of these things do happen. Obviously, death is one. Disability, what happens? It's all around contingencies. What about divorce if something happens? Some sort of distress might occur. You might even be in business with partners who someone else says, "Hey, I've had enough. I want out of here." At disagreement, in that case, I can go on. In fact, in my book, this little one here, The Uncensored Truth About Exit Strategies, I think I've got about 11 in there that starts with D.
Okay. It's funny when you said that, I had a few of those Ds popped into my mind, but you've added some extra ones. Okay. So look, ideally, we've got the business trending up.
Yep.
While maintaining profits. We've got to say it's no point having a 50% increase in your turnover, but your profits going backwards.
That would be alarm bells, actually.
Yeah.
Alarm.
Now, one of the other things that you talked about was being too reliant on suppliers or team members. I think it's fair to say for most healthcare, the reliance on suppliers is not really an issue. This is a service-based model.
Yeah.
But the team members, and the obvious team member to talk about is the practice principal, the chief doctor, the chief dentist, the chief physio. This
Mm.
one's a bit of a curious one, Kerry, because on the one hand, you'd say, hey, look at how little time I'm spending in the practice. I'm only working 1 or 2 days a week. The other 2 days a week, I work on the business and help the team out, and I play golf on the fifth day, stereotypically. On the other hand, some future buyers may say, I'd rather see you personally working 4 or 5 days in the business because you're demonstrating to me what's possible in terms of, they talk about production and how much revenue you can generate. What are your thoughts about that one?
Look, these are more lifestyle choices
Okay.
than anything else. I think that being in healthcare practices requires obviously a fair dependence on the practitioner
Yeah.
because that's where the expertise lies. And however, you can look at it as well in terms of revenue generated per hour. That's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
which is almost no different to any other. It's per employee, basically. So if in fact by leveraging the return per hour, which is about increasing productivity, if that means that you, the main practitioner, have to be there all the time, then it's a trade-off, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
lifestyle. It's a
Yeah.
lifestyle trade-off for the practice that you're in. Or are there other ways that you could work differently to make that happen? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then I think customer database, and you mentioned about it being systemized, having surveys, etc. What would be the things that, to maximize the value, one would want to see in the database?
Obviously, really good records of what's been going on for your clients. How regularly do they visit you? Have they given you referrals? Are you expanding your client base through other means other than having to always direct market? The repeat business is really the holy grail. That's the lifetime value of your client that you can justify. You have them there. And these days, Google reviews, let's be,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
I,
that
I've
can make or break you.
I've argued that, not argued, but listeners,
Yes,
I've put my case that really the Google reviews is one of the assets of the business.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
if you're selling a business where you've got 500 Google reviews at an average of 4.8 or 4.9 or something, it's a great offensive strategy. The data
Mm,
shows that people generally, it's about 10 to 20 touch points before they
mhm,
do business with you. Well, they can read 10 reviews in a row and go, oh, these people sound really good. But it's
mm,
also quite good defensively, which is that
mm.
you only need to get one vexatious individual to give you a 1-star review, and then they slag you off through reviews. And if you've only got 1 or 2 of them, then suddenly things are going badly.
Yeah. Sometimes in practices, particularly in very small businesses, they've underestimated completely just how important those Google reviews are and the need to keep them current as much as anything.
Yes.
And referrals, that's the other thing. You need to analyze your data and understand exactly where your clients are coming from. Clearly, referrals in that type of business are the best advocates. That's the best to have. And if you can prove, if you've got the data that actually says, yes, for 10% of or whatever percentage it might be of your practice hours has come through referrals, and that's how you can prove your growth and what your growth trajectory is, then you have an excellent foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'd say many practices would, on the new patient form, would ask people, I like to say, who do we thank for referring you to us?
Mm.
But it's the same sort of thing. But I would have to say many practices do not actively look at that data or indeed enter it into the system. It depends. Some practices these days, you're entering your data on an iPad and it goes straight into the software, which is great.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, curating that is really helpful. Again, this is growing the value of your business. Who knows when you'll sell? And I suppose the other thing is, even if you don't have plans to sell, yeah, for 10 or 20 or 30 years, I'd hate to say it, but Kerry's mentioned the 5 Ds. Like, God forbid that one of those happens to you. And
Mhm.
then suddenly it's, oh, I've got to move town, country, whatever, for whatever reason. Presumably you're not doing that if it's D for death, but
No,
for the
no, but you know what, Angus, this is something that I do get people to just do a little bit of a checklist about, especially because as human beings, we're notoriously disorganized as far as these things go. And we don't really want to address the inevitable, but we are human. We
Mm.
are all going one day.
Yes, death and
Simple as
taxes.
that. We are going. Yeah. So get your house in order sooner rather than later. And I talk to young people who are in their 30s who might have just bought their first home or something like that. And I said, now you have an asset. Have you got a will? They don't. Get something going. But a simple processes around estate planning. And look, particularly in health practices, there's some pretty, I think, well-to-do people. And I'm sure that they've taken advice around this already in this area. But it is really important to make sure that you have a will, that if you got yourself set up in trusts, that you know exactly who the appointors are and
Mm.
who the successor appointors are. These are all technical things that most people have no clue about. And until such time as it hits you when you've had something go wrong. There's just not a huge checklist, but make sure that you have those things covered off and you know where the documentation is for a start.
Yeah.
That's more important than anything else.
If I go through them again, death, we've got, it can happen. It does happen. That's the reality. Disability, you could be in perfect health and fall off a ladder on a weekend and then suddenly you're out of action for 12 months or whatever. Divorce, we're not going to pretend that never happens. Distress, disagreement. I've seen things like where someone close to someone dies.
Mm.
So it's not even the person themselves. And then they go, you know what? I've been going through the motions in this job for the last 10 years and life's too short.
Yeah.
This person's died unexpectedly. I'm not going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like that expression, like, when was the best time to plant a tree? 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like that for this. Even if you're not thinking of selling for a long time, maximizing your value now and protecting the value of the business is certainly worthwhile.
Yeah.
Look, Kerry, I think we will take you up on the offer of your valuation link and we'll put that in
Sure.
the show notes.
Yep.
Kerry's got a couple of terrific books that I have sitting in front of me here. She already alluded to The Uncensored Truth About Exit Strategies. And we like the sound of this one, $1 Million Payday, How to Get Rich and Get Out. Great headlines on both of those. Kerry, for people who want to learn more or get in touch, what should they
Mhm.
do?
Certainly, if you just Google my name, which is the last name is Boulton with a U, so it's Kerry Boulton, Boulton, you'll find me. My website is theexitstrategygroup.com.au. I'm on LinkedIn as Kerry Boulton Holdsworth, which is my married name. But just do a Google of me and you'll find me. You'll find lots of those links. I have it's not actually up as a web page yet, but I do have a contingency plan list. If anybody would like one, they can just email me, which is kerry@theexitstrategygroup.com.au. I'll happily send it out complimentary. And everything, those are complimentary as well. And if anybody'd like a copy of my books, I'm happy to provide those. Yeah.
Wow, so much value. Look, we'll make sure we get that stuff in the show notes. But look, Kerry, thank you so much for sharing all your experience and wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure indeed.
All right, everyone, we've covered a lot there, haven't we? And hopefully we've got your mind thinking about things that perhaps you hadn't before when you were thinking about the value of your business. So as I like to say every week, knowledge is not power, it's applied knowledge that's power. And it begs the question, what is the one thing you're going to do as a result of what you heard today? Make sure you go and do that before you go on to the next thing. Finally, if you got some value from our time today, then I'd really appreciate if you'd head to where you heard this show, leave us a lovely review, give us the encouragement to bring you more great content every week on Practice Growth HQ.